Welcome to Trauma and Transcendence, where healing meets awakening. I'm Amanda M. Dodd, your guide on this transformative journey. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Let's transcend together. Hello, soulful seekers. How are you? Welcome back to Trauma and Transcendence. Today, as you can see, I am doing a live episode, but it has been a week. How about for you? What is happening in your world currently? I'd love to hear all about it. In any case, welcome back to Trauma and Transcendence. This is episode I've lost count, heaven help me. But I thought it would be a great time since there have been so many interviews. It's been wonderful having so many guests, and I love hearing about everybody's story, the reasons that they do the work that they do, how they do the work they do, and who they're able to help with that work. But it's been a minute since I've had a chance to actually chat with you and to either have a teaching segment or a segment where I'm talking about my development in mediumship from childhood. So this episode is episode 5 of the origin story of a spiritual medium, and that being me. Last episode, I had told you a little bit about my college years and moving into that haunted apartment, and then some of the things that were happening there as I was living there. And, the wildest thing is I don't plan how these episodes come out. I'm not one of those people who has a calendar that runs for several months ahead of time. It's more very synchronistic and organic, and things happen when they happen, and I kind of go with the flow. But it felt particularly well-timed for me to sit and do this episode today because recently I had a client recommend a book. And the book is actually quite good. I very much enjoyed it. Let's see if I can pull it up here for you on Audible so that you can have a look. It is Sister of Darkness, and it's the Chronicles of a Modern Exorcist. And so this is it here. If I can get rid of the glare. Yeah, you're not going to be able to see that. That's okay. But it is a worthwhile listen. And so I actually went through it so fast. I wasn't expecting to, but it was such a good listen that I couldn't stop listening. Matthew, are you really with this comment? What if they're small and not a medium? Well, you know what? I'm short. So I don't know that I'd qualify as a medium either. But in any case, being a spiritual medium is something that if people really want to, they do have access to. And more often than not, what they don't realize is you're listening to your nervous system. It's your proprioception. It is being fully embodied and just having awareness of all of your senses. So most of us have it. Jesse says, suck it in. Awesome. Thank you. leave it to the guys to show up and bring some comedy to today. But that's what we get when I live stream. So in any case, really, really good book. So if you're curious about the whole exorcism thing, spiritual releasement, any of that, she doesn't come from the hypnotherapy perspective. My understanding is she's doing her exorcisms purely via her psychic abilities. Now, and then also she uses several key tools and things like that. But it was an interesting perspective. Now, the one thing that I thought was entertaining and really kind of on point for today, because every time I do these episodes, I have to go back and re-listen to the previous one to remember where I left off in my personal timeline as I'm sharing for you. And when I went back and I was re-listening, what I'd realized was, oh my God, it sounds like an entity she's described in her book. So in her book, Sister of Darkness, by Rachel Stavis, one of the entities she describes is being a larger entity called a collector. And a collector can house all kinds of beings. Now, a collector does not attach to a person, but rather they attach to a place. Hey, Mark. Looking forward to seeing you at Michigan next week. Michigan Hypnosis Conference is coming up. I'm gearing up for it, trying to get this podcast out and then a couple of other episodes so that trauma and transcendence doesn't suffer while I'm out there playing in hypnotherapy land. It's going to be great. So many good talks coming. And anyway, so I thought that was really fascinating. So a collector apparently can consume the space of several buildings. It can be several blocks even. And within that space, the vibration of the building has changed. And so I was thinking about that old apartment in Lennoxville where there was the fire and I was having the psychic phenomenon happening. And I realized how much I changed in that short span of time of being in the college dorm room to then being in this tiny apartment that was haunted, but how much it actually affected me personally. And I'm not usually a depressive person, but I remember dropping out of college at that time and just even leaving the apartment felt really uncomfortable and oppressive. And that was new for me. And I think I was so entrenched in it that I didn't have the consciousness or the realization of it. And, take that for what you will. But the thing that I found interesting was not only did that building have a history of having fires, but even while I was living there, I was having those dreams, being awoken at 3 a.m., having all my senses tell me there's a fire in the building, only to have nothing happen, and then to have actual fires starting in the building. And there was a college prank that had happened, and someone had lit a mattress on fire on one of the top floors. They slid it down the stairs. And so then it ended up actually being a fire. Now, a collector entity, according to Rachel, will stay in a location, keep the vibration low, impact the people who are there. And so then people will start to change. They will become a little more depressed. They will become a little more oppressed, if you will. And so when I was thinking back, I was like, oh my goodness, I completely missed that. I would not have even considered that. So as I do spirit releasement, it's rather different. I don't always focus on places themselves. Now, as a medium, I do go into homes, I do home clearings, but as a spirit releasement practitioner, I'm purely working on the client and whoever and whatever is coming up and out and creating separation and healing there. So it's interesting to see how the two worlds can kind of come together. And so looking at it from that perspective, no wonder I needed to leave that apartment. It's just such a wild experience. So on top of all of the phenomena that was happening there, we were just, I think, tired of living in that space. It was a very small apartment, not a whole lot of room to move around or to stretch our legs for sure. And that was part of what led us to finding a different apartment. And so we had begun to move on and to find a different place in Sherbrooke that was a little bit bigger. That time, I was a little more aware of the energy. And because it was my second place to live, other than like the college dorm room, I paid a lot more attention of, do I like the vibe here? Is this going to work for me? Am I going to be having 3 a.m. psychic phenomenon wake me up? Or can I have a functional, full-fledged life here without disruption? And at that point, I very much was not interested in trying to be a medium. I wasn't trying to have any kind of gifts or have that life whatsoever. It just was not the life that I wanted or was looking for. So it's different when we become more conscious of things, then we're able to identify the abilities a whole lot easier. We don't know what we don't know is kind of my approach to looking at that now. And there was some interesting things that happened when we had begun to move to the other apartment. It was a different kind of building, and that time we got a basement apartment because we had dogs and we wanted, easy access to outside to let the dogs out. And the vibration of the building overall wasn't the best. but it was suitable for what we needed. There was enough light coming in. We had a lot more space. There was extra room so I could have an office. It wasn't one room in a corner and turn around kind of thing. So that was nice. And so one of the things that happened there was by then we'd had several ferrets. Ferrets have been a long part of my history. I have 4 ferrets as it is right now. And I think I'm always going to have ferrets. There's something special about them that is just part of who I am and part of my life very much. But at that time, I had a ferret named Athena, who I had a very particular special bond to. And I can remember that as I was letting them out and we were kind of learning about the apartment, I let the ferrets out and all of a sudden Athena went missing. And it looked like she literally went into the wall and was just gone. And what we realized was there were vents, and the vents didn't have caps on them. And so the ferrets could actually go in the vent and go for who knows how long. And in that moment, I just started to panic, thinking, oh my God, what if she gets out? It's a really big building. What if she goes somewhere and I can't get her? What if she gets stuck? And I kind of stopped. I closed my eyes. I took my breath and I thought, okay, where is she? And then I heard, go to the bedroom. And so I went to the bedroom, and there she was, crawling out of the side of the radiator, and I nabbed her, and it's like, okay, playtime done. But had I not actually asked and made the effort to say, hey, what's happening? Guide me, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. Alan, you do not want to be an arm's length when she wakes up to a psychic phenomenon. He's not wrong. I wake up throwing fists. If I am waking up and there's something floating, and it often happens that way for me. If I wake up to something floating, it's often 3 to 4 inches from my face, and I am immediately throwing fists. I don't even have time to fully wake up before I am just fighting. No, you come into my space, you risk harm. That's a choice you make, and heaven help you. I have to say, you have to admit, Alan, the psychic phenomenon has gone down. I've gotten way better at things like that. You haven't had to deal with me finding snakes in the bed or anything like that. So you gotta give me a fair bit of credit there too. And so what I really want to share with you by sharing that story was make sure that you're taking time to pause and to ask. And if you're in a situation, you're not going to catch intuition if you don't pause and take those moments and check in and await. Intuition and psychic information comes from us having curiosity. It comes from us being in the moment and saying, okay, what's true? And then actually being open to receiving impressions. Now, impressions can come in several different ways, and it depends on which of your abilities is more open. For the majority of the clients that I work with in terms of training mediumship, what I'm finding is many of them are clairsentient before they are anything else. It just seems to be the most open, accessible one that they're comfortable acknowledging and owning and possibly understanding. And what I've found is over the years, as you begin to listen and tune in and have the curiosity, hold the space, receive the answers, and then follow through, is that the gifts begin to unfold and open up. So then things like clairaudience can become a little bit stronger. So when I was in the living room saying, oh my God, where is she? And I got quiet, I paused, I asked, it came through clairaudiently, go to the bedroom. And there she was. And I was able to nab her and put her back in the cage. I've had a weird amount of psychic phenomena happen with ferrets. I don't know why that is. That's just been a me thing, I think. But I think your mediumship, your abilities, your gifts will always be enhanced by those that you love and care about. It'll always be the things at the center of your heart. And I also don't believe that's accidental. I think it's the love. The love that we have is how we're able to bridge the connection sometimes. And so when I'm guiding clients to have their own mediumship experience, sometimes it's hard because they're in the loss of it, they're in the grief of it, they're in the upset. And so what I do often is remind them to go back to the love, go back to the connection, the gratitude that, oh my God, you got to meet this beautiful person and have them in your life for however long that was, and the gift of that. So if you're opening your mediumship, you're working on that currently, staying within the love, the gratitude, the joyfulness over having had a person in your life. Or if you're reading for someone, you're reading for a sitter, it's really important to have that care for the client, have that curiousness for the client, to support them on their journey so that they can heal. And sometimes we do need to go to a medium to get a reading rather than have our own experience. Sometimes we need to hear it from someone else. Some of my best healings have come from mediums who've had no bullshit, just had a very strong approach in telling me, hey, you need to let that go. It's like, okay, noted. If she's picking it up, there's a good reason for that. I'm going to trust that. So what else? It wasn't too long after that. We actually ended up getting married and moving to Calgary. And I just wanted to experience a whole different life. You heard a little bit my journey about job finding and job struggling in Quebec with the whole dual language thing, me being first language English and second language French. Even though I speak French, I can understand it well enough, I can write it. I just was looked over often for that reason. So my fiance at that time spoke even less French. And after he finished college, it was becoming more of a concern of, oh, how is he going to get into the workforce if I was having a tough time and he spoke even less French than I did? And so we made just a weird little synchronistic choice. We had some friends who were going to Calgary, Alberta as well. I have a cousin in Calgary, Alberta. And we thought, what the hell? Let's give it a go. Let's try. And so we actually moved across Canada, away from all of our family, most of our friends, and kind of started over. And the first place that we got to live there was actually the place that we ended up buying and staying in. And it took a minute, and we actually had to travel without some of our pets and things at first and kind of reintegrate and find new friendships. And within finding new friendships there, I'd met an incredible woman named Kate. And Kate was a family member of someone in the Alberta Ferret Society, because we found a rescue and things like that, so that when we had ferrets, we would, have some community like that. And she had come to one of the fairs that the Ferret Society was having, and she was an animal communicator. And so I had a hunch that something was going on with Athena, that Athena wasn't well. It was just something that I felt, and I didn't have a way of explaining the feeling. I know now that that's claircognizance. It's that clear knowing without having proof or evidence, but it's that gut instinct. And so I knew there was something wrong with Athena. I'd taken her to the vet. We hadn't found anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling. And so I had Kate give her a reading. And Kate did quite well with the reading, actually. And much to my surprise, really kind of gave me some insight that I wasn't anticipating. And so in previous episodes, you'd heard me talk about my ferret, Daisy. How when she passed, she opened up all of my psychic gifts and abilities, to include mediumship. And then how after she passed, she still continued to visit and to validate and to teach me things, but this time from the other side. And it turned out that I didn't give Daisy a proper send-off. I didn't give her a proper goodbye. And that is something that I kind of want to dive into a little bit today and to talk about. So when we have someone who's passing and they're choosing to go, whether conscious or unconscious, their soul is choosing. When I say choosing, that's what I mean. And it's their time to go. It is important that we can give them as much grace as possible, to give them a little bit of confidence that, hey, no matter what, even though you are not going to be here, I'm going to be okay. You don't have to worry about me. And giving them that is one of the biggest gifts we can give. Now, because I was still in high school when Daisy had passed, I was just entering into college. I hadn't done that. And the grief was real. And I really held on tight. And so that connection to our loved ones is one of the things that can keep them earthbound, can keep them stuck, can keep them checking in on us more often. And I think because of the relationship I'd had with my old mummy, she was there from the time I was a toddler, from the time I was 6 months forward. I thought spirit was meant to hang around all the time. I guess maybe in some ways I was a little bit of privileged when it came to mediumship because I was comfortable with having spirit around. I thought that's the way it was supposed to be all the time. So I never gave Daisy that full amount of grace of it's okay to go to the light, go on to whatever your soul's next mission kind of is. And that's something that is so important. And it wasn't just important for her, it was important for me because there I was having a whole new set of ferrets, having Athena and several other ferrets, and they were being impacted by my ferret in spirit that had passed. And so as Kate was doing the animal communication reading, she actually told me that Daisy was jealous because she wasn't getting the attention that the other ferrets were getting. She wasn't getting the attention because I wasn't aware that she was so present. And so I wasn't giving her that attention. And it began to kind of make her colder, make her a little more brutal in picking on the ferrets that were living. So it is a gift for both, not just our loved ones in spirit, but for us to give them grace to move forward, to let them go on and to work on their soul's missions. Because if we don't, we're holding each other back in a really unfair kind of way. Now, I see a lot of that with spirit releasement as well. Oftentimes when I start those sessions, the first entities through the door are often the earthbound spirits who are like, I got stuck here. I don't know how to leave. I don't want to be here anymore. Help me leave this place. Or they are possibly attached to the client and they like that symbiotic relationship. Either the client is engaged in some kind of addictions, could be emotional, could be physical, energetic, you name it. And they're addicted to it. And so they don't want to let it go. And so sometimes the client can't give up the addiction or they can't give up the anger or the intense sadness that is happening. And so often they are the first ones to say, okay, ready to go, peace out, help me out of here. Yesterday I had an incredible session. I actually wasn't supposed to be doing spirit releasement. We were doing on some inner child work and parts therapy, and this is someone who'd like to give up vaping. And so I was looking to see, what is happening for you internally that you feel you need to do this? And she mentioned that every time she tries to give up vaping, essentially what happens is she starts to have really horrible nightmares and kind of night terrors. And I thought, that is interesting. And so I thought, let's do an exploratory session. We'll spend 2 hours figuring out what is going on there. And so we dive in and I'm doing some inner child work. And then all of a sudden the inner child pipes way down and doesn't want to communicate anymore. And I'm like, what's happening here? And she says she's scared. And I'm like, what is she scared of? And then an entity began to come into the safe space that I had created for her to communicate and to kind of say, hey, I'm not leaving, but I'm attached to that little part in there, that little inner child part. It was kind of almost being bullied by this entity. So it ended up being a little more impromptu spirit releasement, much to my surprise. And I think somewhat to hers too. But we did get several entities released. And one of them had just a lot of sadness, a lot of anger, and that would come through the client too. And so when I checked on her today just to say, hey, what's happening for you? How is this evolving? She said, I feel so much calmer today. I feel a lot better. She hasn't fully given up the vaping yet. We're going to address that in the coming weeks. But now we're able to separate and find out whose addiction is it. Is it the clients? Is it entities? What role are they playing? And she did actually have one larger entity that was not an earthbound spirit. I don't want to go into that too much, but that actually did have the addiction of smoking and didn't want her to give that up. So moving forward, at least that's going to make that easier for her to begin to sort out and to separate from and to clear. But that's why it's important for us to give grace to those who are passing, whether they are on their deathbed or if it's before and you know this is the last time you're going to see them. Maybe they have some kind of chronic illness. Still, try to give them a sense of confidence that you're going to be okay and that they are going to be okay and that they can move on. They can move on to whatever their soul needs to do next, because to keep them is not only selfish on our part, but it's also damaging on our part too, because then they end up hanging around and that can really influence the places and spaces we live. So that is my thought on that. And essentially what ended up happening was I made a plan with Kate to come to the townhouse and to do a walk around, but also to help me release Daisy so that Athena could be happy and better and be a much better ferret. And in any case, so Kate came to the townhouse, she did a walkthrough, and that was my first time having a medium or animal communicator come to my space of living and actually check on things. And we'd had some phenomenon that I was kind of brushing off and I was kind of pushing aside and saying, oh, this is just something in my head. This isn't anything, this isn't psychic phenomena happening. No. No. And we often do that, don't we? We often brush those things off because we don't fully know what they are. And so we don't try to validate them. And that's essentially what she ended up doing. So the townhouse that we moved into had a basement, relatively creepy because it was unfinished. And I couldn't help but notice every time I went to the basement, it felt like there was an intimidation factor. If I was going down the stairs, I was a little more careful about not tripping because it just felt like something that could happen. And if I was heading upstairs, I would get the impulse or the urge to run. And I don't say that lightly. Run as in I felt like something was chasing me up the stairs, kind of run from the basement. And if I spent a lot of time in the basement, which later at one point I did, it felt like I was being watched. It felt like there was this oppressive, territorial kind of feeling to it. And so that was the first place I wanted Kate to go. Before we did, the whole releasing of Daisy's energy so that she could move on, we wanted to make sure there was nothing else kind of playing around. The other thing that was happening in the house, I had a little puppy who was a Boston Terrier named Rocky. And while Rocky enjoyed playing with my other Boston Terrier, Emily, she could be kind of cruel to him. And we had another set of stairs going from the main floor all the way up to the top. And Emily would sometimes just chuck him down the stairs, and I would have to try to catch him or watch him bounce, and it was the saddest thing. And that's the thing, though, with kids and with little animals who are young and who don't have that critical factor formed, they're a lot more open. And so there would be moments when Rocky would stop what he was doing. It looked like he'd get distracted, and then he'd run off and chase something. And we would see him have like full out play sessions with something. And once or twice, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a little boy with a striped shirt. Kind of like a black and white, almost like a Pugsley Adams kind of shirt. And so as a joke around the household, we started calling him Jimmy. Oh, don't worry about that. Rocky's just playing with Jimmy. And again, we thought, oh, we're having fun with this. We're making it up. He's just a puppy. He's confused kind of thing. We brushed it all off. No. So Kate comes in and we're trying to take her to the basement, and immediately Rocky starts playing with Jimmy. And so we stop and we pause and we start explaining to Kate what we've kind of noticed him doing. Kate takes a moment, she takes a couple of breaths, she tunes in, and she's like, oh, you do have a little boy here, and Rocky is his favorite. And so this child, the ghost, was actually playing with the puppy. And nonetheless, we were calling him Jimmy But when Kate tuned in, she actually got the name Timmy. And that's going to be important later, but for now, I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger with that one. And so Rocky would have just full out play sessions with Timmy. And I'd asked, where are Timmy's parents? And it seemed like Timmy had passed some time in childhood. His parents no longer lived there. But he had that striped shirt on. And our sense was kind of that he might have been alive in the 1950s. And for whatever reason, his spirit was still there. And he just loved all the animals that I had. And so he would come in and play with the dogs and play with the ferrets and have a good old time. So that earthbound really wasn't causing any harm, so we didn't feel the need to necessarily do too much. But Kate did help him move on, and that felt a little better. When she finally got down to the basement, we didn't say anything. I didn't tell her what we were experiencing, mostly because I, one, didn't want to talk about it, and I definitely didn't want to admit it in front of anybody else. I was already just trying to be normal within that marriage. And when I say normal, I mean not having psychic phenomenon. After the first apartment, the last thing I wanted was more psychic phenomenon for my spouse to either mock me over or just not agree with, or he would eventually turn things around on me as though I was crazy. And I didn't want any more of that, so I really kept much more of it to myself as possible. And so Kate went down the stairs and she made it about halfway. And she said, "Oh, you have a chief down here." And it was an Indian male with a full headdress. And what she was aware of in that moment, the psychic impressions she was getting, were that he was very much territorial over the basement. And so that impulse that I had to run up the stairs from the basement as quickly as I could, he was actually chasing people up and out of the basement because that was his territory and he didn't want to share the space. So, that being said, how many times have you been in a space and energetically sensed either that intimidation factor, that feeling of, ooh, something feels territorial here, or, oh, there's a sense of oppression, or I feel like something is staring at me, behind me, or, those kinds of things. And how many times have you brushed it off? I'm willing to bet it's been quite a bit. That's been the case for me. And I think when we start to slow down and have a little more awareness and have opportunities to have somebody like Kate, an animal communicator or a medium, someone who's an empath able to sense energy, come in and validate it, or even if you just have more open conversations with the people around you. And I want to say energetic conversations, not just open, but I want to bring back the language of energy in terms of, ooh, this room feels wonderful. There's a sense of openness. There's a sense of comfort here. Or, oh, there is a tension in the air here. This room feels uncomfortable. It feels constricting. I feel unwanted in this room, in this space. I want to bring back those kinds of conversations because, one, when we open and we begin to share, we start to have more conscious awareness of what we're experiencing. And then, two, other people are having those same experiences. They're going to validate your experience or give you additional insight, give you another piece, that something maybe they picked up on that you had not. Not everyone is a clairsentient, and so some of the people around you may have claircognition come in. They may have that clairaudience where they hear something. They may have some clairvoyance where they pick up an impression. And either way, you can start to have a bigger picture of what's actually happening there for both of you and within the spaces that you are. And that's so important because then you get to have more choice. You get to have more say of, okay, we have an Indian chief in the basement who's territorial and doesn't want to share the space. Are we good to keep him here? Do we need to move him on? Would he be happier somewhere else? And is it a threat? Is it a danger? And I know that a lot of people don't want to talk about that aspect of it because I think people often get scared. But when I think back about that Lennoxville apartment and that how haunted it was and that entity of a collector possibly being there, those kinds of conversations are very important. And it's important because of how much change I went through in so little time, and I did it unconsciously. I didn't know what was making me depressed. I didn't know what was causing me to lose interest in things I loved, like school. I didn't know why I felt so exhausted or tired, or how I felt so uncomfortable leaving the house. And it wasn't about what was outside, it was about the influences that were inside the house. And there were moments that I had told you about already where we were in the apartment, we were having psychic phenomena, and these spirits were actually playing off me and my spouse to the point where we were both exhibiting physical mediumship elements. Transfiguration, when a spirit can kind of superimpose itself over your energy and you can see its face and it can actually speak through you. When I told you about that moment where we were laying in bed looking at each other and I kind of laughed and I said, "Hey, Alfred," that was so random. And we kind of both looked at each other and saw other faces other than our own. That's a really good sign that it's time to get out of that space. One, because that's a very physical boundary violation. And sure, that was innocent enough. But at one point, does it start to get more serious? And if we're talking about an entity like a collector, that means there are many earthbound spirits in that place. Many of them are feeling stuck, trapped, possibly angry or vengeful. They may be in the horrific last moments of their life and reliving that over and over again. And so that is the vibration that they're holding to that space, of which humans are susceptible. Animals too, as we learned from Rocky. So if we can start having more conversations in a more energetic, alchemical way, I really feel like more people would see their mediumship in action. They would have that better, richer understanding of, oh my God, what is happening in my life? This stuff is crazy. And then it's happening to other people. So, oh, not crazy. Got it. It's just more human than superhuman. That I would love to see. So that's why I do these. And that's my hope, is that more of you are going to hear some of my stories. You're going to recognize elements of yourself in it and begin to call it out. In any case, coming back to Kate, she did, in fact, clean out the townhouse. I want to say there were those two spirits and then Daisy. Now, that townhouse didn't have a collector. The differentiation between having an entity like a collector is that earthbounds and then other entities as well, lesser ones, can be trapped there. And it seems like they just accrue more and more. And so that theme of that apartment that we had in Lennoxville having fires all the time, and it's like it was just the same thing playing out over again. That's one of those hints that kind of gave me that aha moment when I was listening to the book of, oh, I can totally understand the whole collector entity. And it really made me look back at that apartment in Lennoxville way differently. And had I not moved there, I wonder if I might have actually completed my my college education, or if I would have gone a different route. Who knows? Me being me, I think mediumship was a non-negotiable. I think I would have ended up here one way or another. Spirit releasement, I don't know if I would be or not. I think having that experience living in a place that's haunted definitely played a big factor. And then a lot of the other early experiences that I had, as well as many later experiences. And I'm trying to place in my mind if this had happened before Kate or after Kate. But this is one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had that I'm about to share with you. Me having lived in Calgary, Alberta, I wasn't big into the whole serial killer thing. especially at that point in time. There wasn't so much publicity and things like that or interest in that. There weren't true crime things happening on TV. Oh, goodness. This was back in, I think, it's kind of tough to say. I think this had to be sometime between 2004 and 2005. And essentially what had happened was, I can't recall if Kate had cleared our home of entities and spirits before this or after this. All I know is there was one night, and people always talk about their sleep paralysis demon. I don't know that I can identify with ever having one. If I did, this would be the closest thing to that. And essentially, we had gone to bed, and I was aware of being asleep and dreaming. And usually when I slept, I just, had my hands out to the sides kind of thing, and was always a couple of fingers reach away from my then spouse. And I can recall feeling awake, but not having my eyes open per se, but having awareness of the room. It's like I was sleeping, but I could see the whole room and everything that was happening. And so I remember all of a sudden looking at the door, because I often slept on my side, and seeing what looked like black smoke coming from underneath the door and building up in the room. And again, this oppressive, uncomfortable feeling started to come up. And it was like so intense that I became aware of my body in a full-on freeze. Could not move a muscle, could not move a thing. And so I'm seeing this black smoke coming in the door, and I'm wanting to fidget and move my body and get away. And I'm in full-on sleep paralysis. Could not move a muscle. And so sleep paralysis is a natural phenomenon that happens, because if we didn't have it and we were dreaming, our bodies would respond as though we were awake, and we could actually get severely hurt. And so it's a natural function within the brain that's very important. At that moment, I was not cognizant of that, and I did not care. What I was aware of was my absolute discomfort as I'm watching this black fog smoke kind of roll in the door. I'm starting to feel as though something is coming. And immediately I'm thinking, no, I don't care what is on the other side of the door. I'm having a Gandalf moment of, you shall not pass. I do not want you in this room. You're not passing that threshold. This is my space. That's a no-go. So that was one of my first opportunities at really sending boundaries with spirit and entities and things like that coming into my space and encroaching. And that's something I'm very passionate about teaching children as well, so that they can learn to set the parameters of their space, so that if something is coming around or playing tricks or energy, that they can send it off. In any case, it's getting to that point where I am really struggling. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I can feel this black hole of cold, empty darkness, and it just is the worst feeling ever. There are not enough words to describe what I was feeling at that moment, but as I can feel it coming further through the door, I'm feeling a sense of urgency to get my body moving. And so I'm trying with all of my might to get my hands moving so that I can touch my spouse, who's like a couple of hands away, to kind of say, hey, there's something in the house, there's something in the room, like go take care of it. And I opened my mouth to scream, and not a sound came out. It was the worst feeling. And so then I'm starting to get really frustrated, and I'm a little angry. I'm getting a little spicy at this point, and I'm like, who the hell are you? And at that moment, when I asked the question, I opened myself to intuition. I wasn't expecting an answer, but I got one. And essentially what I heard was Jeffrey Dahmer. And I'm like, who the heck is that? It's like, I don't care who you are. Like, why are you doing this? I don't want you here. This is my space. I don't want you in my room. I don't want this sleep paralysis. And as I could feel it kind of breaching through the door and seeing the whole door looking black at that point, my body unlocked, and I started to be able to move my hand, and I woke up my spouse. And of course, he was irritated because Amanda's having psychic phenomena at night again, and she's waking him up in the middle of his sleep. You can imagine how well that goes over. By that point, after living in the haunted apartment, he'd had enough of psychic phenomena coming from me at night. In any case, this time it was undeniable, and I couldn't hide it, and I couldn't keep it to myself. And he's actually wondering what the hell is going on. And so I sat and I explained it in detail. The blackness, the fear, the feelings of intimidation, the feelings of how it felt like a black, cold pit of nothing, and how my body locked up and I couldn't respond, and how I tried to scream and no sound came out, and how terrifying that was. And it took a solid minute because that time I needed to be consoled. It was the scariest thing I'd ever experienced. And then he was asking me what I could remember, and I said that there was a name. It sounded like Jeffrey, and then Dahmer. And we kind of brushed it off and didn't think too much about it, went to bed. The next day, I guess he was telling his coworker about my experience, and she happened to be a true crime serial killer following kind of person. And she's like, "You're kidding. I have that movie." And so he calls me from work. He's like, "Oh, hey, your dream last night, somebody has a movie about that person." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And he's like, "No, apparently he was like a cannibal serial killer who ate people. I'm living in Calgary, Alberta. That is not something I've heard of. That's not something I am used to." And I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way. Oh my God. His employee brought over the movie, and when I watched it, I was horrified. I'm going to have to say there are some funny aspects to that because my spouse at the moment was incredibly homophobic. It kind of seemed like a little bit of karma. And I almost wonder if his energy about him and having those attitudes kind of pulled in that opposite negative energy. In any case, that was the moment I began to educate myself about things like, okay, how do we clear a home? Where did this being come from? How did it get in, and how do we get rid of it? And I want to say that Kate helped with that too. So she wasn't only an animal communicator, she was also a medium, but she was a very powerful psychic. And so she came back to the house, and she had brought sage with her, and she showed me how to sage a home. And what we had tracked was that being, whatever it was, I don't know if it was Jeffrey Dahmer or not. I don't see why his spirit or energy would come all the way to Calgary, Alberta, and show up in a random townhome. So it could be just an entity that was using his likeness. It could be a trickster energy that was just trying to use intimidation factor. It was terrifying enough, but the whole Jeffrey Dahmer thing was lost on me because I had no clue. In any case, she showed me how to clear the home. I learned about sage, how to smudge, and I learned about how to set my boundaries as a medium about allowing things into our spaces. And so when we've talked about intention on this podcast before, it is not just for the living. Boundaries and intention and affirmations are equally for those on the other side. And so if you are having psychic phenomena, having spirit kind of press your boundaries, come into your spaces, and that is not an experience you want to be having, you need to become psychically assertive and be able to establish those parameters with yourself, but also with spirit. It's the same when I do work as a medium. I'm not a medium who's got my shingle out there at 3 a.m. I'm not interested in nighttime visits. Nothing is that pressing. In fact, my thoughts are they are already dead. There is no harm for them to wait until the next day or whenever an appointment opens up. But I'm not interested in that, and most of us should not be. There is no extreme urgency. I don't understand these mediums who feel like they need to drop what they're doing in the middle of a grocery store, run up to some poor unsuspecting person who's struggling with grief or having some challenge, and then emotionally bombard them with the impressions that they're receiving. Boundaries, please. And this is something that I teach my students, and it's just incredibly important. So the boundaries are for you, they are for spirit, they're also with clients for their benefit, because first of all, do no harm. I don't think that I've ever seen an interaction happen in public that has been life beneficial for someone. There's always been a bit of a drawback. I don't want to be the medium who drops a whole bunch of insight on someone who wasn't asking for it, wasn't just waiting for it, and then all of a sudden they have to go out in the world and drive, and then they're emotionally dysregulated. They're upset and they're wondering, was this whole experience true? Was this a con artist? Who knows? It matters. So, first things first, we can become very, very clear. And although that spirit was very intimidating, whether it was an entity or a spirit, I still don't know to this day. I have not put myself in trance to go in to find out. I could go into the Akashic Records and say, hey, what was that about? I haven't done it. One, because it still weirds me out, and I still remember how terrifying that experience was. But primarily, the big lesson was learning to claim our power. And so even though there are trickster energies, there are entities, there are earthbound spirits and things that can have that intimidation and that fear factor, we are more powerful. And knowing the fact that we have free will, can set intention, can make choices, and can energetically enforce it is one of the first foundational lessons that I want to share with people who are becoming mediums. Your affirmations, your intentions, your energy, they matter. And if you think that you are just going to be at the will of spirit, and if you're thinking that that's how it has to be with your gifts, that's an uncomfortable ride. I wouldn't want to set anybody up on that ride. Nonetheless, be on it myself. Because if you're just open, unconscious, and walking around in the world, there are going to be entities that will want to play with that, take advantage of that, create chaos. It's incredibly unsettling. I'm very dysregulating as well. I didn't drive until my 30s, largely because I had to get the mediumship thing under control. Because there's nothing like driving down the road and seeing someone's loved one in spirit show up in the back seat and want to have a conversation about someone that you passed 2 blocks away while you're trying to focus on the road. No, thank you. I'm not going to cause an accident today. So having boundaries, and it's not just about, having a good night's sleep and not being disrupted in that way. But don't be the grocery store medium. Don't be practicing mediumship when it's a time that you can't do it safely. Your physical safety is always going to matter more. Not just for the accidents that could happen, but also because your health, your gifts will go offline if your body is in survival mode or thinking that it can't survive something. That's just the nature of it. Spirit's not going to care if you're wanting a message from someone for a client. If you are living in hypervigilance, you're not able to take a deep breath and be in your body. It's working on surviving in that moment. So that will always trump your gifts. In any case, I learned powerful lessons during that time. Unbelievable. And despite clearing the energy in the basement, I do think that energetically, maybe there was still a residue kind of left over, like a residual energy. I do know that as I spent more time there, I began to feel different and change. I didn't experience the chief or the need to run up the basement steps anymore, which was a great relief. But I did notice that we needed to clear that basement, particularly the drains, whatever it is for some reason. Drains, water, any kind of heat tanks, any kind of furnaces, they seem to build up kind of like a chaotic energy that earthbound spirits and other lesser entities can kind of use, and they can build up that frenetic energy and actually create phenomena happening. And so what I became aware of was that space needed to be cleared at least once a month. And so usually on a full moon, we would make it a point to sage basement all the way up to the top floor of the whole townhouse. Inside, outside, people and pets too. and usually working from one side all the way to the other. Ideally, leave a window or door open as you're completing. Have the intention that things can exit on the way out and not come back in. We can talk about how to properly sage it. Do have a blog about it, and I can attach it into the notes in case you want to explore that more deeply, because there are so many different kinds of interventions and herbs and sprays and resins and incense or essential oils that you can use to physically clear your space. In any case, they will work for most things, not for everything. That is a conversation for a different day. But for today, that's what I wanted to bring. Now, that whole experience really is a large force between why I do what I do, because there was no one that I could share that with after, other than Kate, who understood. The really fascinating thing is even now, it has been over a decade. It's been nearly two. Nearly 2 decades. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning things. And so there are some mediums out there who've never experienced lower vibrational energy like I did in the basement or in my bedroom at that time when that thing came up to kind of intimidate and steal energetic power from me. There are mediums out there like James Van Prague, who keeps his vibration up there and so high that he only experiences loved ones in spirit when they're at a certain point of healing, or angelic beings. That I find really fascinating. And then there are those that only experience entities and lower and darker things, those earthbounds that need more healing. So if we talk about a medium who is here in Ohio, Marianne Winkowski, she has an incredible couple of books out, very much worth looking into. And she is the one who kind of brought forward the medium show that had that one actress who I can see, but I'm forgetting her name. That's terrible. In any case, the storyline was about Melinda Gordon. That's the character name on that show. And she kind of talked about her life experiences through that character. Really, really great show. But a medium like her, she was able to see lesser kinds of entities and then loved ones in spirit who were at that lower vibration, who needed that help to cross over. And so my point, again, same as last episode, not last episode, but episode 4 on my origin story of becoming a spiritual medium, there is a spectrum that happens within mediumship as well as compared to psychics and empaths. And I think that's really fascinating. So just because you meet a medium that has their vibration at a certain point doesn't mean they are not experiencing what they say they're experiencing. It could just be that their vibration limits their experiences. So if you have someone who's continuously experiencing psychic phenomena that is scary, that is dark, that is gruesome, lower vibration, they need to raise their vibration. They need to make some lifestyle changes and have some clear intentions and boundaries. If there's someone who's only on the high vibration side, very beautiful way to live, but that wouldn't be the person that I would go to do a spirit releasement. Now, having the insight is what makes the difference. Because it's a spectrum, I can slide my energy from one side all the way to the other, and I get to experience both. It's not easy to do all in the same sitting. Vibration changes like that take a little more time sometimes, and it can be a lot to do on a regular pattern often. But if you're experiencing one, you can experience the other end of the spectrum by shifting your vibration. I don't recommend lowering your vibration, dropping into the lower states and experiencing things without having some good insight. Either have some mediumship training, understand well the protections that go along with it, because that's very important too. All of those things are things you want to take into account and consider as you're developing your mediumship ability. In any case, that is where I'm going to leave you today. I do want to say next episode, I will be having Gregory, what is your last name? Just a moment. Gregory Nicholas. He is a Ohio medium, an absolute treasure, this man. You're going to love him. He's very down to earth, powerful medium, but has such an incredible heart and an incredible story, too. You're going to have a chance to meet him, to ask some questions. So if you've got questions for Greg, submit them now because we'll be speaking on the 17th, and that episode will be coming out to you on the 19th. And Greg is going to specifically talk about, so his upcoming as a medium was very, very different. He'd had several generations of mediums before him. So he had people who really paved the way and taught him how to work with his abilities and gave him tools. I think he's using a deck of cards to this day that have been handed down through the generations. Very much not my experience. In any case, he has so much insight. So he's going to come onto the podcast for you and share some wonderful things. I'm very much looking forward to that. He's going to speak specifically to what it's like as a medium working with police on missing person cases. So if that is something you want to develop as a medium, you're intrigued about, that will be the episode for you. And after Greg, I did it. I said I was going to do my best to have Laura Whitworth come on the podcast. We recorded it this week. That episode will be coming out for you and will be available on September 26th. And of course, we talked about my favorite, spirit releasement. So we talked about how Laura got her start in spirit releasement. She was a therapist and doing other work before that, and how she moved into the realms of knowing how to release entities from her clients, the kinds of things she was seeing. She goes into different kinds of entities on this episode, talks about some of her really cool experiences. I can't wait for you to hear it. In any case, loved ones, that is coming up. Thank you so much for being here with me, for being patient and exploring. What is this? Jesse. I was told there would be punch and pie. Buddy, I don't know who told you that. I am not no Southern Belle. I did not have punch or pie available for you. You're on your own with that. In any case, I hope that through hearing some of this today, you have been able to see some of your own experiences in a different light. They are not supernatural. They are just natural. And I have them, you have them. We all have them, and you can learn to live with them in healthy, happy ways so that you're not having really crazy psychic phenomena at night and scary. You can kind of pass all that. I learned the hard way so that you don't have to. All right, loved ones. I am wishing you the best. Stay healthy, stay happy, but most of all, stay inspired. Bye for now. I wish you bright blessings. Thank you for joining us on this transformative episode of Trauma and Transcendence. Your stories matter. I would love to hear them and from you. Connect on our website, healingbeyondtrauma.com, or drop me an email at amanda@healingbeyondtrauma.com. Remember, healing is a journey we take together. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired. This is Amanda, wishing you bright blessings.